Ever wondered who made us laugh the hardest? Have you thought about the comedians whose voices were silenced too soon? Number 8. John Belushi. What happens when raw talent meets unbridled energy? John Belushi happens. This comedic force of nature burst onto the national stage through Saturday Night Live in the 1970s, creating characters so vivid and performances so physical that audiences couldn't look away. Belushi's eyebrows alone could tell a story. His ability to transform his body and face into whatever the comedy demanded made him an instant standout among SNL's original cast members. The samurai character, the Blues Brothers, his spot-on Joe Cocker impression, these weren't just funny bits, they were masterclasses in commitment to character. When Belushi and Dan Aykroyd took their Blues Brothers act from SNL sketch to full-blown movie, they created something that still resonates today. Belushi wasn't just playing a character, he was living inside it, bringing an authenticity to the role that made you forget you were watching a comedian. He could make you laugh until your sides hurt, then turn around and deliver a moment of surprising depth. His film career showed his range beyond sketch comedy. Animal House gave us Bluto, a character so perfectly realized that college students still emulate his antics decades later. The food fight scene alone secured Belushi's place in comedy history, but it was his ability to make even the smallest moment memorable that set him apart. Behind the scenes, though, Belushi fought demons. The pace of fame, the pressure of success, and a growing drug habit created a perfect storm. When he died of a drug overdose in 1982 at the Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles, he was just 33 years old. His death shocked Hollywood and devastated fans who had only begun to see what this generational talent could do. Belushi left behind questions about what might have been. Would he have continued with more Blues Brothers? Moved into dramatic roles, perhaps directed? We'll never know, but what we do have is a legacy of laughter that continues to influence comedians today. When someone commits fully to a physical bit or throws their entire being into a character, there's a little bit of Belushi's spirit living on. Number 7. Gilda Radner. What makes someone both hilarious and heartbreaking? Gilda Radner had that rare quality. As one of the original not-ready-for-primetime players on Saturday Night Live, Radner created characters that weren't just funny, they were fully realized people with quirks and vulnerabilities that made you love them as much as laugh at them. Roseannadanna, the gross-out news commentator who always began with, "Hey, Jane, it's always something." Lisa Loopner, the nerdy teenager with nasal congestion and an awkward laugh. Emily Litella, the hearing-impaired elderly woman who would misunderstand news topics and launch into misguided editorials. These characters weren't just comedy bits, they were lovingly crafted creations that showed Radner's incredible range. Radner brought a childlike joy to her performances. You could see it in her eyes, she was having as much fun performing as the audience was watching. That quality made her instantly likable, a comedian who never punched down but invited everyone to laugh along with her. Her physical comedy rivaled that of Lucille Ball, contorting her expressive face and throwing her body into every scene with reckless abandon. After SNL, Radner took her talents to Broadway with a one-woman show, Gilda Radner Live from New York, which showcased her ability to command a stage all on her own. She met her husband, Gene Wilder, while filming Hanky Panky, beginning a love story that would become even more poignant in light of what was to come. When Radner was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 1986, she approached her illness with the same authenticity that characterized her comedy. She documented her experiences in her memoir, It's Always Something, titled after Roseannadanna's catchphrase. Her openness about her struggle helped raise awareness about cancer at a time when many still considered it taboo to discuss. Radner died in 1989 at just 42 years old. Her death prompted the creation of Gilda's Club, a network of community centers where people living with cancer and their families can find support. Even in death, Radner's legacy continued to touch lives. What makes her loss particularly poignant is the sense that we were just getting to know the full range of her talents. SNL was only the beginning, and her film career was just taking off. We're left wondering what other characters she might have created, what other laughs she might have shared, what other truths she might have revealed through her unique brand of heartfelt comedy. Number 6. Chris Farley. How does someone so large in both physical presence and personality disappear so suddenly? Chris Farley exploded onto the comedy scene in the early 1990s as part of Saturday Night Live, creating a series of unforgettable characters that showcased his unique blend of physical comedy and surprising vulnerability. Farley's comedy often centered around his size, but never in a way that felt self-deprecating. Instead, he used his body as an instrument, hurling himself into walls, through tables, and down stairs with a commitment that was both shocking and hilarious. His Chippendales Dancer audition alongside Patrick Swayze remains one of SNL's most iconic sketches, not just because of the physical contrast between the two men, but because of Farley's complete, joyful commitment to the bit. Then there was Matt Foley, the motivational speaker who lived in a van down by the river. With his hitched-up pants, awkward gestures, and increasingly desperate warnings about failure, Foley became Farley's signature character. The brilliance wasn't just in the shouting or the physical gags, it was in the subtler moments, the flashes of insecurity that made the character simultaneously ridiculous and relatable. Farley brought that same energy to his film career. Tommy Boy and Black Sheep, both co-starring his friend and comedy partner David Spade, showcased Farley's ability to carry a movie with his charisma. Even in these broader comedies, Farley found moments of genuine emotion that hinted at the dramatic actor he might have become. Behind the cameras, Farley battled substance abuse issues throughout his career. Those who knew him described a kind, sensitive man whose outsized public persona often masked deep insecurities. He sought treatment for addiction multiple times, but the demons proved too strong. Farley died of a drug overdose in December 1997 at the age of 33, the same age as his comedy idol, John Belushi. The parallels between their lives and deaths were not lost on those who knew both men. What makes Farley's death particularly tragic was what seemed to be on the horizon. He had been developing a biopic about Fatty Arbuckle, the silent film comedian whose career was derailed by scandal. The role would have allowed Farley to showcase both his comedic gifts and dramatic potential. He was also reportedly recording the voice of Shrek before his death, a role that went to his SNL castmate Mike Myers instead. Farley's influence lives on in the physical comedy of later SNL stars and in the memories of fans who still quote his lines. When we watch his old sketches, there's both laughter and a twinge of sadness for what might have been for the mature comedic actor who was just beginning to emerge from the wild man persona. Number 5. Mitch Hedberg. Ever heard a joke so perfectly crafted it seemed to rewire your brain? Mitch Hedberg specialized in those. With his laid-back delivery, distinctive vocal style, and sunglasses that shielded his eyes from the audience, Hedberg created a comedy persona unlike any other. Hedberg's comedy wasn't about long stories or political commentary. He trafficked in short, perfectly crafted observations that revealed the absurdity of everyday life. I used to do drugs, I still do, but I used to too. His one-liners were like little gifts, each wrapped in his unique perspective and delivered with a slight stammer and chuckle that made you feel like you were hearing something he'd just thought of. What set Hedberg apart was his ability to notice things nobody else seemed to see. He could take the most mundane objects or experiences, escalators, receipts, club sandwiches, and transform them through his skewed lens. An escalator can never break, it can only become stairs. You should never see an escalator temporarily out of order sign, just escalator temporarily stairs. Sorry for the convenience. Hedberg didn't look or sound like other comedians. With his long hair and sunglasses, he more resembled a rock star than a stand-up, and his stage presence was distinctively awkward. He often looked down or away from the audience, a manifestation of his stage fright that somehow enhanced rather than detracted from his performances. When a joke didn't land, he'd acknowledge it with a self-deprecating comment that often got bigger laughs than the original punchline. Despite his growing cult following in the comedy world, mainstream success largely eluded Hedberg during his lifetime. He appeared on Late Night with David Letterman and had brief roles in films, but he was primarily a comedian's comedian, revered by his peers perhaps more than by the general public. Throughout his career, Hedberg struggled with drug and alcohol abuse. Unlike some comedians who made their struggles part of their act, Hedberg's substance issues remained largely in the background of his public persona, though he occasionally made references to them in his comedy. Hedberg died in 2005 of a drug overdose at the age of 37. His death sent shockwaves through the comedy community, where he was universally admired for his utterly unique voice. In the years since, his reputation has only grown, with comedy fans discovering and sharing his work online. What makes Hedberg's early exit particularly poignant is the nature of his comedy itself. His one-liners seem timeless, not tied to any particular era or trend. Each time we hear one, we can't help but wonder about all the observations he never got to share, all the absurd connections he never got to make. In an alternate universe, an older Mitch Hedberg might be tweeting perfect one-liners about smartphones and social media, finding the strange logic in our increasingly illogical world. Number 4. Bernie Mac. How does someone turn personal pain into universal laughter? Bernie Mac knew the secret. Born Bernard Jeffrey McCullough on Chicago's South Side, Mac developed a comedic style that was as direct and unflinching as it was hilarious, drawing from his difficult upbringing and speaking with an authenticity that couldn't be taught. Mac's comedy career began on the streets of Chicago, where he performed wherever he could find an audience. His big break came when he won the Miller Lite Comedy Search in 1990, leading to club dates and eventually HBO's Def Comedy Jam. It was on that stage that Mac delivered his famous "I ain't scared of you mother-f***ers" routine, addressing a tough crowd with such confidence and skill that he instantly became a standout among a generation of great black comedians. What made Bernie Mac special wasn't just his jokes but his delivery. He spoke directly to the audience, often addressing them as America, creating an intimacy that made you feel like he was talking specifically to you, even in a crowded theater or through a television screen. His facial expressions, particularly his bulging eyes when he was making a point, became a signature as recognizable as his voice. The original Kings of Comedy tour and subsequent film introduced Mac to an even wider audience, showcasing his ability to command a stage and tell stories that had audiences doubled over with laughter. His routine about disciplining his sister's kids, which became the basis for his sitcom, demonstrated his skill at finding humor in challenging situations without ever losing the underlying humanity of the story. The Bernie Mac Show brought Mac's comedic perspective into America's living rooms for 5 seasons. Unlike many comedian-centered sitcoms, it maintained the distinctive voice of his stand-up, including direct addresses to the audience and his unfiltered approach to family challenges. The show won a Peabody Award and multiple NAACP Image Awards, cementing Mac's place as a groundbreaking voice in television comedy. Mac's film career flourished alongside his television success. He brought his unique energy to movies like Ocean's 11 and its sequels, Bad Santa, Mr. 3000, and Guess Who? Whether playing a smooth-talking casino heist specialist or a protective father, Mac brought authenticity and impeccable timing to every role. Throughout his success, Mac battled sarcoidosis, an inflammatory disease that affects multiple organs. He rarely discussed his health struggles publicly, continuing to work despite the challenges. In August 2008, complications from pneumonia led to his death at the age of 50. Mac's passing came when he appeared to be at the height of his powers. He had successfully transitioned from stand-up to television to film, each medium allowing him to showcase different aspects of his immense talent. One of his final films, Soul Men, alongside Samuel L. Jackson, was released posthumously, giving fans one last chance to see the comedian do what he did best. Bernie Mac left behind a legacy of fearless comedy that never shied away from difficult truths. His influence can be seen in countless comedians who followed, particularly those who bring personal experiences to the stage with both humor and heart. When we watch his performances now, there's a bittersweet quality, knowing that his distinctive voice was silenced when it seemed he had so much more to say. Number 3. Robin Williams. What happens when genius meets kinetic energy? Robin Williams happens. From the moment he burst into public consciousness as the alien Mork from the planet Ork, Williams displayed a comedic velocity that seemed barely contained within a human form. Williams' mind worked at a speed that left audiences and fellow performers breathless. His improvisational skills were legendary, able to create characters, voices, and entire scenarios in the blink of an eye. On talk shows, Williams would riff off a simple prompt, taking the audience on a journey through dozens of impressions, accents, and perspectives before finally returning to Earth, leaving everyone wondering what just happened and wanting more. Mork and Mindy introduced Williams to television audiences, but it was stand-up comedy where his uninhibited energy found its purest expression. His comedy specials showcased a performer in complete command of his gifts, seamlessly transitioning between prepared material and spontaneous creations, physical comedy and thoughtful observation. Watching Williams perform was like witnessing a high-wire act without a net, thrilling, slightly dangerous, and impossible to look away from. What made Williams truly special, however, was his ability to channel his manic energy into dramatic performances of surprising depth. Good Morning, Vietnam allowed him to combine his improvisational comedy with dramatic moments that hinted at the range to come. Dead Poets Society, Awakenings, and The Fisher King revealed an actor of extraordinary sensitivity, able to convey complex emotions with subtlety and grace. His Academy Award-winning turn in Good Will Hunting showed yet another side of his talent, the ability to embody quiet wisdom and compassion. The scene where he repeatedly tells Matt Damon's character, "It's not your fault," demonstrates how Williams could convey years of lived experience and emotional understanding in a few simple words. For younger audiences, Williams became beloved through family films like Mrs. Doubtfire, Jumanji, and as the voice of the genie in Aladdin. Even in these more commercial projects, Williams brought uncommon heart and spontaneity, elevating material through his complete commitment to every moment. Throughout his career, Williams battled addiction and depression, struggles he occasionally referenced in his comedy but largely kept private. His openness about his relapses and recovery demonstrated a vulnerability that made his connection with audiences even deeper. What few knew was that Williams had been diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, a progressive brain disorder that causes problems with thinking, movement, behavior, and mood. On August 11, 2014, Robin Williams died by suicide at the age of 63, shocking fans worldwide who had no idea of the severity of his health struggles. The particular tragedy of Williams' death was learning afterward about his diagnosis and how the symptoms had been affecting his daily life and work. His widow, Susan Schneider Williams, later shared that the disease had caused him increasing anxiety, paranoia, and cognitive difficulties, a cruel fate for someone whose mind had always been his greatest instrument. Williams' legacy extends beyond his performances to the countless comedians he inspired and the millions of lives he touched through laughter. His ability to make people feel less alone in their struggles, to find humor in darkness, and to bring joy even when experiencing pain himself created a connection with audiences that transcended entertainment. When we watch him now, there's both the delight of experiencing his boundless talent and the sadness of knowing the internal battles he fought while bringing so much happiness to others. Number 2. Andy Kaufman. Was he a comedian or performance artist? Did we laugh with him or at him? Was he putting us on, or was he genuinely in his own world? Andy Kaufman raised these questions throughout his career, creating a body of work that still defies categorization decades after his death. Kaufman never told jokes in the traditional sense. Instead, he created experiences, often uncomfortable ones, that forced audiences to question their expectations about entertainment. His foreign man character, with his awkward timing and terrible impressions that would suddenly transform into a perfect Elvis Presley, played with the audience's patience and then rewarded it in unexpected ways. This character would later evolve into Latka Gravas on the sitcom Taxi, giving Kaufman mainstream exposure while still allowing him to maintain his peculiar sensibility. Then there was Tony Clifton, the obnoxious lounge singer with the terrible toupee and worse attitude. Kaufman insisted Clifton was a separate person entirely, sometimes having his friend Bob Zmuda play the character so that Kaufman could appear alongside him. Clifton would insult audiences, sing off-key, and behave so badly that people genuinely weren't sure if this was an act or if this horrible performer had somehow gotten stage time. One of Kaufman's most famous bits involved reading The Great Gatsby aloud to an audience in its entirety. When they inevitably began to leave or protest, he would offer to put on a record instead, then play the recording of himself reading the book. It wasn't designed to make people laugh in the moment. It was calculated to create confusion, frustration, and a story the audience would tell later. Kaufman's wrestling career, particularly his feud with Jerry, the King Lawler, took his performance art to another level. Declaring himself the intergender wrestling champion, Kaufman would wrestle women during his shows, offering $1,000 to any woman who could pin him. This evolved into a supposed hatred of wrestling and wrestlers from the South, leading to one of television's most shocking moments when Lawler slapped Kaufman on Late Night with David Letterman, causing Kaufman to unleash a tirade of profanity. Years later, it was revealed that the entire feud was a work, with Kaufman and Lawler collaborating on the hoax. Throughout his career, Kaufman maintained a childlike enthusiasm for certain oddities, like his love of the children's character Mighty Mouse that he showcased on the first episode of Saturday Night Live. This quality gave his most absurd performances an innocent quality that made them strangely endearing even when they were designed to provoke. When Kaufman was diagnosed with a rare form of lung cancer in late 1983, many fans believed it was just another elaborate hoax. Even after his death in May 1984 at the age of 35, rumors persisted that he had faked his death as the ultimate performance piece. Such was the nature of his relationship with reality that even his mortality came into question. What makes Kaufman's early exit particularly significant is that his work seems more relevant now than ever. In an era of reality television, social media performance, and the constant questioning of what's real and what's fabricated, Kaufman seems less like a comedic outlier and more like a prophet who glimpsed the future of entertainment. Had he lived, one can only imagine how he might have used the internet as a canvas for his particular brand of reality-bending comedy. Number 1. Richard Pryor. Who changed comedy forever? Richard Pryor did. Before him, stand-up comedy had boundaries, lines that weren't crossed, topics that weren't discussed openly on stage. Pryor not only crossed those lines, he erased them entirely, creating a new template for honest, autobiographical comedy that influences every comedian working today. Pryor's early career in the 1960s showed little of the revolutionary voice he would become. Performing in suits and ties to predominantly white audiences, he delivered polished, inoffensive material in the style of his idol Bill Cosby. The transformation began when he walked off stage during a performance at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas in 1967, having experienced what he later called an epiphany about the inauthenticity of his act. When Pryor reemerged, he was a different performer entirely. Gone was the sanitized material, replaced by raw, profane, and brutally honest observations about race, sex, his troubled childhood, and the realities of life in America. His classic comedy albums of the 1970s, That Nigger's Crazy, Is It Something I Said, and Bicentennial Nigger, captured a comedian operating at the height of his powers, transforming pain into laughter through sheer storytelling brilliance. What made Pryor special wasn't just his willingness to use profanity or disgust taboo subjects. It was his ability to create fully realized characters drawn from his life experiences. His impressions weren't of celebrities but of the people he grew up around: his grandmother, the neighborhood winos, his father, the local pimps and prostitutes. These weren't just voices, they were complete human beings with distinctive perspectives and humanity. Pryor's honesty extended to his own failings and struggles. He talked openly about his drug use, his relationships, his heart attack, and in perhaps his most famous routine, setting himself on fire while freebasing cocaine. He transformed these harrowing experiences into comedy that was simultaneously hilarious and deeply moving, finding universal truths in his very specific life experiences. His film career brought his talent to even wider audiences. His collaborations with Gene Wilder, particularly Silver Streak and Stir Crazy, showcased his chemistry with the straight man Wilder and his gift for physical comedy. Richard Pryor Live in Concert captured his stand-up at its most electric, while films like Blue Collar and Lady Sings the Blues demonstrated his considerable dramatic talents. In 1986, Pryor was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a degenerative disease that gradually affected his mobility and eventually his speech. Despite this diagnosis, he continued performing when he could. His last major film role came in 1991's Another You, again with Wilder, though his illness was visibly affecting his performance. Pryor died of a heart attack in December 2005, after years of declining health. He was 65 years old. By then, he had already secured his legacy as perhaps the most influential stand-up comedian in history. Chris Rock, Dave Chappelle, Eddie Murphy, and countless others have cited Pryor as their greatest influence, not just for his humor, but for his honesty and willingness to mine his own life for material. What makes Pryor's story particularly powerful is that despite all his challenges, a traumatic childhood, addiction issues, health problems, and the racial barriers he faced in his career, he transformed his pain into art that changed comedy forever. When we listen to his albums or watch his performances now, they still feel startlingly current, still capable of making us laugh while opening our eyes to truths about American life that many would prefer to ignore. Have you ever wondered what other stories these comedy legends might have told if given more time? How many more laughs might they have given us?